Rob was part of each audition, and he was living with her and soon to marry her. And
Everyone thought the story was simple. Clean headlines, quiet tributes. But behind closed doors, something was deeply wrong. The calls started coming after midnight. The house grew silent, and fear moved in long before anyone was willing to say it out loud. He had money, power, and an entire industry around him. Yet the real danger wasn't outside the gates. It was already inside the house. And the people who knew the truth stayed silent until one voice finally broke.
She never planned to speak publicly. No press tour, no prepared lines, no damage control. When a reporter casually asked how she was holding up, she froze. For a moment, it looked like she might walk away. Instead, she whispered, "You don't know what he was living through." Then she looked up and added, "We failed him." That single sentence shattered the version of events everyone thought they understood. She wasn't just an old colleague or a distant friend. Their bond stretched back more than 5 decades. They spoke constantly, sometimes several times a week, sometimes late into the night. She was the person he trusted when he couldn't trust anyone else. In the months leading up to the end, those calls changed. They started coming after midnight. When she answered, he'd say almost nothing. Sometimes he'd hang up within seconds. The first time she confronted him about it, his voice sharpened. "I can't talk long," he said. Then quieter, "He listens." The line went dead. At first, she tried to rationalize it. Stress, exhaustion, paranoia brought on by pressure. But the pattern didn't fade, it intensified. The calls became more frequent, shorter, more urgent. Then came the request that made her stomach drop. "Promise me something," he said during one of their final conversations. "If anything happens, tell the truth." She agreed without fully understanding what that promise would cost her. And that was when she realized the fear wasn't imagined, it was being lived with every single day. But what she saw the next time she visited his home made it impossible to ignore.
The change didn't start with him. It started with the house. That place had always been loud. Open doors, long dinners, friends dropping by without warning. It was the kind of home where conversations spilled late into the night. Then, almost overnight, everything stopped. Visits suddenly required advance notice. Even longtime friends were told to call ahead. When asked why, he didn't explain. He snapped. "I need to know who's coming. I need time." It sounded less like hosting and more like preparing. Inside, the atmosphere felt wrong. Every blind was drawn, even in the middle of the day. The rooms were dim, quiet, heavy. When she reached for one of the windows, he grabbed her wrist and whispered, "Please don't." Not angrily, desperately. Voices were kept low, as if the walls themselves were listening. Conversations ended when footsteps passed the hallway. What once felt like privacy now felt like surveillance. Then came the arguments. Raised voices upstairs, accusations about money, demands that wouldn't stop. She heard him trying to calm things down, begging for volume to drop. The response came back sharp and fearless. Or what? The silence that followed was worse than the shouting. The physical signs started appearing soon after. Long sleeves in summer, forced smiles, excuses delivered too quickly to be real. When she noticed marks near his wrist, he brushed it off with a joke that didn't land. His hands were shaking when he said it. That's when she understood something terrifying. The gates weren't keeping danger out anymore. They were sealing it inside. And soon, someone else would walk into that house and see it for themselves. The confrontations followed a pattern. They never happened in public, never when outsiders were nearby, only behind closed doors, when help was farthest away.
The accusations always started the same way: money, control, betrayal. He was told he was withholding access, cutting ties, trying to punish. Each argument pressed harder than the last, pushing boundaries that had already worn thin. She witnessed one exchange that stayed with her: the pacing, the agitation, the way the air seemed charged, like something could snap at any moment. He tried reasoning, tried calming things down. "Let's talk later," he said, "not like this." The response came cold and immediate: "You don't get to decide that anymore." What frightened her most wasn't the anger, it was the confidence. There was no fear of consequences, no hesitation, just the certainty that nothing would happen no matter how far things went. That realization settled heavy in her chest. The physical signs became harder to ignore. Bruises explained away as accidents, injuries laughed off before questions could be asked. Every excuse sounded rehearsed, every smile arrived half a second too late. Behind the scenes, he was shrinking, appointments canceled, appearances skipped, meetings delegated without explanation. People noticed, but no one pushed. It was easier to assume stress than to confront the alternative. By then, she wasn't just worried, she was alarmed. This wasn't chaos, it was control. And then, unexpectedly, someone else stepped into the middle of it, someone powerful enough to recognize the danger immediately. And what he witnessed would trigger the strongest warning of all.
The visit wasn't supposed to be dramatic. It was framed as a casual meeting, a conversation about future plans, nothing more. But the moment he walked inside, he knew something was off. Raised voices echoed down the hallway. Tension hung thick in the air. Someone was crying. Another voice cut through it, sharp and demanding, pacing back and forth like a caged animal. The argument wasn't ending, it was escalating. Then it crossed a line. He stepped forward just as the situation turned physical, positioning himself between them without thinking. The room froze. For a split second, no one spoke. The stare that followed was empty, unblinking, unashamed. Once the house settled, he pulled him aside, away from the walls, away from listening ears. He didn't soften his words. "You're not safe here," he said flatly. "This isn't manageable anymore." The warning landed hard. He was shaking, not in denial, not defensive, just exhausted. He didn't argue the point. Instead, he whispered something that revealed everything. "He's sick. If I turn my back now, I lose him forever." What followed was an offer few people ever receive. Distance, protection, a way out that didn't involve public fallout. Everything handled quietly, immediately. He refused. For him, forcing help felt like betrayal. Consequences felt like abandonment. He still believed patience could reach where fear already had. But the man who issued the warning didn't let it go. And in the weeks that followed, the messages grew more urgent. Because the calm that followed wasn't real, and the danger was only waiting.
After that warning, everything became a balancing act. On the surface, things appeared calmer. Fewer arguments, softer tones, promises made in quiet moments that sounded sincere enough to believe. He clung to those moments, treating them like proof that patience was working. Privately, the messages told a different story. Check-ins became frequent, short, pressed with urgency. He was urged to create distance, even temporarily, just one night away, just enough time for things to cool down. The responses came back measured, hopeful, and dangerously optimistic. "We're managing. It's better now," he promised. Each reply felt like hope bargaining with reality. Those close to him noticed the change. He hesitated before speaking, second-guessed simple decisions. Every choice was filtered through one question: will this make things worse? Love had stopped being comforting.
It had become strategic. What haunted his confidant most was how carefully he avoided consequences, not for himself, but for the person causing the fear. He downplayed incidents, softened language, left out details that might trigger intervention. Every omission was intentional. He wasn't trying to escape, he was trying to protect. And that's what made it so dangerous, because when love starts absorbing fear instead of confronting it, it quietly clears the path for escalation. The pressure didn't disappear, it condensed, it waited. By the time the final night arrived, the pattern was already set, and the decision he made then would change everything.
On the final night, he didn't call authorities. He didn't alert friends. He didn't sound an alarm. Instead, he reached out quietly, asking for private help, someone to come by, someone to calm things down, someone to talk, not intervene. When asked if anyone was in danger, he minimized it. He framed the situation as tense, emotional, manageable. He never said he was afraid. He never said things had crossed a line. That choice mattered. Records later showed how carefully the situation was softened. No emergency language, no urgency markers, just enough concern to request presence, not enough to force action. Even in that moment, he was still shielding the person who terrified him. Those who reviewed the timeline afterward would all reach the same conclusion. If the full truth had been spoken just once, everything might have unfolded differently. But it wasn't. When the news broke, shock rippled outward instantly. Tributes poured in, statements were released. The story was framed as sudden, tragic, unthinkable. Most people accepted that version without question. The ones who knew better went silent. The outside witness who had warned him days earlier reportedly said only one sentence when he heard. "I warned him," he told a friend, "and he chose love." That line lingered because it captured the unbearable truth. This wasn't ignorance, it wasn't denial, it was a decision made out of hope. And what emerged afterward would expose how many people saw the warning signs and chose not to name them.
What shocked her most wasn't just what happened inside the house. It was how many people noticed and did nothing. Agents, lawyers, and even doctors had seen the warning signs: sudden cancellations, strange injuries, unexplained financial movements, patterns that didn't add up. And yet, almost all of them stayed silent. Why? Image, reputation, comfort. The unspoken rule was simple: don't be the one to say it out loud. Protect the narrative, protect the career, protect the illusion. Protect him, yes, but only the version the world was allowed to see. She recalled a private call with a longtime industry executive. "This will destroy everything people believe about him," the voice warned. But she fired back, unwavering. He was being destroyed while you protected an image. Even friends who wanted to help offered advice that softened the truth. Frame it as a family tragedy. Mask it as mental health struggles. Avoid the word that could make it real. She refused every suggestion. "Tragedy doesn't leave fingerprints," she said. "Violence does." The silence of those around him stacked like bricks, forming a wall no one dared to breach. And by the time anyone realized the danger had escalated beyond control, it was already untouchable. The system didn't fail because it couldn't act. It failed because no one wanted to name the reality that was right in front of them. And that
Finally, she spoke. Not to rewrite history, not to tarnish a legacy. She spoke to tell the truth no one else would. It wasn't about scandal or fame. It was about recognition. Power, wealth, and status don't protect anyone from harm.
They don't excuse silence. They don't erase the cost of protecting an image over a life. She revealed how every layer of the system had overlooked, reframed, or minimized the warning signs. Emergency room visits dismissed, financial red flags ignored, messages pleading for intervention buried under polite correspondence. Every instance stacked into a pattern that no one wanted to face. She made it clear, if the roles were reversed, if the victim had been a woman, society would have named it immediately. But because of assumptions, because of perception, because of fear of disruption, it was left unspoken. And in breaking her silence, she reframed everything. This wasn't weakness. This wasn't failure of courage. It was love, stretched beyond reason, protecting someone at a cost that couldn't be calculated. The question she left hanging, one that now sits with everyone watching, is simple but devastating. How many warnings does love ignore before it becomes fatal? It's a question that refuses to fade, a story that refuses to stay hidden. And now it's up to the world to reckon with what.
In the end, this isn't just a story about fear or secrecy. It's a story about choices, how love, loyalty, and hope can sometimes blind even the strongest to danger. It's about the people who saw the signs and stayed silent, and the one voice that finally broke through, too late to change everything. What we're left with isn't a scandal or a headline. It's a truth that refuses to be ignored. Even the most powerful, celebrated, or seemingly untouchable people can be trapped in situations most of us couldn't imagine. And the cost of protecting an image or protecting someone out of love can be higher than anyone expects. Hollywood may try to forget, to sanitize, to move on, but the story lingers because the warning signs were real and the consequences were irreversible. And perhaps the hardest question is the one she left us with. How many warnings does love ignore before it becomes fatal? Think about it. Talk about it. Share your thoughts below, because some truths demand more than silence. And if you want to uncover more hidden stories, shocking revelations, and untold truths from behind the curtain of fame, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you never miss an update.